I've been learning Korean since 2015, and I spent all of that time living in South Korea. So when it came to language learning, it really felt like my biggest priority was to master that particular language. And then about a year or two ago, I just suddenly stopped. I lost all motivation and I just became really burnt out with Korean. Now, it's been a long journey back to a healthy relationship with my Korean studies. So in today's video, I thought I would share with you guys my advice for dealing with language learning burnout, how I think I could have avoided it, and how I generally deal with it. What leads to burnout? Now, the first reason that I personally think I suffered a lot of burnout with my Korean studies is just the sheer amount of time that I had spent learning Korean on a regular basis over a course of several years. Now, don't get me wrong, because I was really excited when I first started learning Korean. It was this new shiny object. I was really excited to learn Korean. And within months of starting to learn Korean, I actually moved to South Korea. So it became a language that the more I learned, the more it benefited my daily life. And that in turn made learning Korean much more rewarding, because not only was I just learning it because I wanted to, but I had an immediate opportunity to use it in my daily life, to use it to have a better relationship with coworkers, to make friends, and to just live my life in South Korea. But that ultimately led to my burnout, because I always felt guilty if I wanted to explore another language, and I just avoided touching other languages. I always felt my Korean's not good enough, I'm not fully fluent, so I need to keep focusing on this language no matter what. Now, I know a lot of you might not be learning the language that you're learning in the country that it's used, but I know a lot of us who are working with multiple languages, we tend to have that one particular language that we focus on the most, and it can be really hard to pull ourselves away from that and spend time on other languages, because the mindset is the less time I spend on this, the longer it's going to take for me to master it. And I think whether you are abroad or not, if you're learning more than one language, there's always that one language that you're like, oh, but I have to focus on this one, and like kind of push the other ones to the side. And on the other hand, I feel like we dive into our studies because we love it, but also it takes a really long time to learn a language. But I think after a while of focusing so hard on one language, you get kind of tired of feeling like it's never done. And I think that's really where the burnout starts to begin. How to avoid burnout? Now, the best way to deal with burnout, honestly, is just to try to avoid it in the first place, because once it hits, it takes a lot of energy out of you. It takes a lot of time to get over. But there are a few things that I realized in my own experiences that I could have done to prevent that burnout from occurring. Maybe this one is really obvious, but if you're anything like me and you dive so hard into your language studies or just any hobby in general that it's like hard to come up for air, one thing you really need to do is make sure you don't neglect other areas of your life, like your sleep habits, your health, socializing with friends, seeing family, making time for other hobbies, or just like doing nothing. Regardless of why you're learning a language, if you spend a lot of time on this language every day for an extended period of time, that is setting you up for burnout in the long run. It's really important that you take a week or two off here and there where you just don't worry about that language or the goals related to it as well. Make time to rest, to see family, to see friends, and even spend time on other hobbies as well. The key thing being, don't just try to do all of this on top of your studies, but actually trade days here and there where instead of studying, you focus on these other areas of your life. Also, if you are interested in other languages, but you feel like you don't have the time, or you feel like you should be at a certain level first with this language before you start that other one, just start. Because this other language can actually be a great escape from that one particular language that's more likely to burn you out. And it can provide like a lot of newfound energy and excitement that's just going to like overall boost your mood. What to do when you experience burnout. So if you're already feeling like you're in the midst of language learning burnout, or you feel like you're quickly headed that direction, then what can you do now? I honestly think that the best thing that you can do if you're starting to feel burnt out with a language is just totally stopping everything that you're doing with that language for a certain period of time. It will depend on your situation, obviously, because unless you have a test coming up or like an immediate reason that you really need to focus on that language, I think the best thing that you can do is to just stop entirely all of your language learning for 1 or 2 weeks minimum, just so that you can give yourself the time to rest and relax and just do nothing and recharge. And then after you get all the rest that you need, do things that will re-energize you, build excitement and creativity in your life again. It's really important that you take an extended break, because you need time to rest and recoup from the feelings of burnout. And you're not going to be able to do that while you are doing the very thing that caused the burnout in the first place. But I've learned that just resting is not enough. You really need to take a long extended break where you have enough opportunities to do things that are fun and energizing. And get to a point where you're not just fully rested, but you're energized, you're motivated, and you're full of creativity again. During your break, it's also important to really assess what your goals are with this language and if all of the things that you were doing up to this point were actually aligning with those goals. And assess if everything that you've been doing up until this point was just too much. Think about if you go back to learning that language, what could you do differently? Is there any sort of new methods that you could try? Is there something that you could do that would make learning that language more fun and exciting and motivating? How can you approach it from a mindset of having fun and being playful with the language? I read somewhere that burnout isn't about being stressed about doing a lot. It's actually about the feeling that you have about what you're doing. What really helped me deal with my burnout with Korean was realizing that a lot of what I had been doing was just really intense and really boring. I really lost sight of what made learning Korean fun and exciting in the first place. So I took a lot of time to consider what could I do to make my studies more fun. Finding the fun and starting over. Now, if you're experiencing workplace burnout just because you have a really difficult job, it's very stressful, a lot of people will recommend you to consider looking for other jobs and just get out of that environment because it might not be a good fit for you. But with language learning, we're not going to do that. We love learning languages and we know we're not going to quit. So I think that we fall into this trap where we get burnt out and then we think, oh, I just need to take a few days to rest. And then we go back to learning the language and doing the exact same things that led to burnout in the first place. And then the cycle just repeats itself. If you know at your core that you love language learning and that burnout is just a temporary difficulty in this journey for you, then I highly recommend just treading carefully forward. You cannot go back to what you were doing before. I think if you experience burnout, unfortunately, you will never be able to do those things that you were doing before because a change has occurred in you and therefore a change must occur in your approach. And I think the key to returning to your language studies full of excitement and passion again is giving yourself not just that rest period, but time to do things that will bring back that creativity, bring back that motivation, bring back that excitement. And that's going to come from things that aren't language learning. And then when you come back, it's really important that you come back with a different mindset, a different approach, and you try new ways of learning that language. In my case with Korean, when I came back, I just didn't focus so hard on the language. I signed up for lessons with a tutor to focus on weaker areas for me, which was my pronunciation, and my tutor helped me fix pronunciation speaking skills, and we picked out a book that was relatively easy for me. But that actually made it more fun to show up because yes, I was still working on things that I really needed to work on, but it wasn't the most challenging thing ever, and that really helped me feel like I was having fun and I rebuilt my confidence with the language. I also started to listen to more Korean music. I watched a lot more TV shows and films in Korean just to get a lot of listening practice and exposure in the language, but just to have fun rather than go really hard into my Korean. I essentially stopped to smell the Korean roses, so to speak, and I started to focus more on enjoying Korean rather than rigorously trying to improve my Korean. Then I decided to pick up another language that I was passionate about, and I started to dabble a little bit in Hungarian, and I started to study Japanese more seriously. Both languages I really wanted to learn, but I had held off learning them because I always felt like I needed to prioritize Korean. Essentially, the more time I took away from Korean and deprioritizing my Korean led to me doing other things that brought that energy back, that brought that motivation back, that I started to actually genuinely miss Korean and remembered why I loved it so much. And it was through doing other languages and doing other things that I was able to realize oh, I miss Korean, and actually get started again and actually feel really excited to get started again. But this time I'm making sure not to go too hard with my Korean so that I can prevent that burnout from coming back.